what started pushing you deeper down this road of, I guess just the conscious path, like talking about reconnection to nature. Who are we? What is our role in the greater scheme of things? Because I've heard you talk about these. And also how has breath work helped inform or help integrate or push you along that path as well?
So I suppose a good place to start would be sort of about 3.5 years ago. I was creating a shitload of content on my YouTube channel. I was for a few years I did daily vlogs. Back when there was only like a bunch of us doing daily vlogs, and I suppose I was one of the first sort of travel influencers. So I kind of rode that very early YouTube train, and I found myself just so busy in my life with so many things causing me so much stress. I just was super overwhelmed. And thankfully, I had a motorcycle accident. And thankfully, it was also quite a slow one. And nobody was at fault except me. And I basically high-sided myself over my motorcycle and fractured my whole elbow. Now, because I was kayaking so much when I was younger, and I was on the British team for kayaking for like 10 years, I pretty much stayed away from anything dangerous or anything that I perceived would make me go slower in a kayak. So everything was just about going faster in a kayak. So I lived in this quite protected bubble, and for good reason. And so this was my first surgery that I'd ever had. The first time I'd really spent a night in hospital. And this was 3.5 years ago. I'm 35 now. So like when I was about 31, 32 years old. And quite a wake-up call for me to have to sit and recover from this surgery and not be busy. I just had to sit and be with myself, finally, for a while. And it was hell. I hated it. I was like, I realized that I fucking hated myself. And I hated the overwhelming life that I'd created for myself. And I went into this really, well, what I suppose a lot of people would refer to as like the dark night of the soul, where I went from being known as the literally like Captain Positive on YouTube. The feedback I was getting was like, how are you always so positive about life? And I was like, well, what's there to complain about? I have the best life ever. I get paid to travel the world. And then I had to make a video for people and say, look, my arm is like swollen 3 times the size, and I'm starting to understand what people are talking about when they say mental health. I feel like I feel like I'm not actually as happy as I make out in my videos. And so there's many, many layers to this story that people might find particularly interesting, but there's like codependent relationship with my audience, where I was dependent on their feedback and their validation. And suddenly a bunch of people in my audience were like, well, what have you got to complain about? Like, don't talk to me about depression when I'd give my right arm for your lifestyle. And that kind of broke my heart. And I was like, wow, I actually can't rely on these random strangers on the internet for my happiness, it turns out. So that was quite a wake-up call. And then that going from being super positive and having the best life ever and really just refusing to complain about anything, feeling guilty anytime I sort of complained about anything, to really facing up to the reality that I was miserable, and I didn't know what to do about it. I had no emotional intelligence. I didn't know how I was feeling. I didn't know how to explain how I was feeling to people. And as I sort of went on this path, I was like realizing there were a few moments in that dark night of the soul where I was like, fuck, I don't even know if I want to be here really actually anymore. And in those moments, I was like, how have I got here? Like, how have I really got here right now? Is this real even? And so as things happen with the universe, kinds of like the universe was like putting a few people in my life that were helping me on my journey. And I met a few people who were able to, as they say, hold space for some deep and meaningful conversations and some emotions to start flowing out of me. And I started to realize, it's healthy to cry. Like, it's healthy to feel whatever the emotion is that I'm sat with right now. And that was just a revelation for me for my whole life, being such a sensitive being. Like, and I know now that like I can feel things so deeply, and it's such a beautiful, profound part of who I am. It's like I'm literally here to feel it all. That's part of my whole reason for existing. And I was suppressing this and pushing all of these emotions and feelings down for my whole 30 odd years. And then, yeah, the dam broke, and for months I would just cry and be confused and move through all sorts of different emotions and feelings, and really not knowing what any of this meant, but at the same time trying to explain to people in my life that I wasn't happy and I didn't know what I was doing and I needed help. And this was the hard thing for me to do, was like to ask for support and ask for help. And so an interesting thing happened actually on this journey, is like, as I was trying to find the words to ask for help and ask for support, and on occasion even trying to convince people that I needed, that like I wasn't in a good space, I got something called Bell's palsy, which is where half your face just stops working and it's like melted, and none of the nerves work in the one side and none of the muscles work. And so I'm like on a YouTube video going, things aren't good. Like, and then finally a few people were like, okay, shit, things are really not that good. And that was luckily it only lasted for 3 weeks, but it was a real helpful aspect of my journey that helped people actually pay attention to my mental health condition. And so now I'm like, well, there must be some kind of meaning to all of this suffering. Like that, and now I'm looking for meaning. Now I'm asking questions like, why? Why depression? Why so much anxiety? Why the questioning of whether I'm even supposed to be here or not? And of course, as with these things, when you start to discover that it's real for yourself, then we start to have empathy for all the other people who it's been real for a long time. I just haven't really noticed because it wasn't anything to do with me, like anxiety, depression. And there's also a lot of other people who are asking these big questions and have been asking these questions for a long, long time. Like, why are we here? What's the purpose of existence? Give me some reason for all of this suffering. And then I realized my grounding cord for being here actually is the spirituality. Like then I grabbed hold of that as like my life raft.
Make sure y'all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.